And so words then are very powerful, very, very creative, and they can either create or they can destroy. And so through the words that one speaks, one actually creates a certain kind of atmosphere in the conversations, all sorts of things. Yeah? Through singing, the kind of songs one sings, it generates a certain kind of atmosphere. And, through words, we're trying to describe the world in which we live. So you can have two different people can describe the same situation, and it can create a very different impression who's doing the describing. Yeah? One may be looking at things very negatively and critically, and one other person may be looking at things very optimistically and positively. And you get a very different picture, a very different impression. And so words then are very powerful. And so this means you shouldn't misuse language. And anyway, in Confucianism it talks about the rectification of names. Confucius was asked, if you had the power to change, to make everything right in China, where would you start? And he said, I'd start with the rectification of names. And people said, what on earth are you talking about? What's so important about that? He said, well, let the king be the king. In other words, the king should behave as a king is supposed to behave. Let the father be the father. The father should behave as a father should behave. Let the son be the son. The son should behave as the son should behave. So the words then should be understood and used correctly. Yeah? So for example, an example of this is the word freedom. So we talked about this before. What does the word freedom mean in English?
Free within law.
Yes, it's a combination of two words, free and dom, which comes from the Anglo-Saxon doom, which means law. So freedom means you're free within the law. You can do anything you want as long as you don't steal, kill, and break the law. So it creates this realm of freedom. Whereas sometimes people don't realize that, and they use the word freedom in a very different way. Yeah? So they're taking this very precious word freedom, and they're using it for all kinds of other things. And this is where this conversation we had about positive and negative freedom. Yeah, I said positive freedom is not actually freedom. It's taking the word and using it to mean something very different to what it really does mean. So, not misusing language. So how can you misuse God's name? Sorry?
Say God damn it.
Worse than that. Okay, so this is when... Anyway, so again, it's not misusing language. I remember, for example, some years ago, there was a particular political situation in Britain in the 1970s, and I remember one particular member of Parliament said, this is the worst piece of legislation that's been passed for a generation. And I thought, well, that's important. So I read it, and I thought, actually, that's not... Oh, that's all right. That's not so bad. And then I thought, well, supposing something serious came along, what would he say? This is the worst. And I realized he'd use very strong language. So if we use strong language all the time, then when something really serious comes along, we've got nothing else to say. We've debased our language. It's like debasing the currency. Yeah? So if you're somebody who never swears, but then one day you do, then people look up and think, wow, it must be serious. Yes? And it's the same then. So sacred words, if you misuse sacred words, then they become debased. Yeah? And often, what are the swear words connected to in a language? They're often connected to sexual things, aren't they? Whereas actually sexual love should be something incredibly holy, because God is love, then sexual love also should be something very holy, something very sacred. But actually people have used those words, which should be holy and sacred words, they use them as swear words. They've debased them and devalued them. Yeah? Again, that's a terrible thing to do. And so how this particular commandment fits in, it's about not misusing God's name. And so this is something called priestcraft. So for example, there may be somebody who says, if you do this, then God will punish you. Why would a person say that? To control you. Yeah? They said, you must do this, otherwise God will punish you, or don't do this, or God will punish you. It's a way of controlling you. They're not willing to sit there and talk about it, explain rationally. Instead, they call on God's name. They're taking God's name in vain in order to manipulate and control you and get you to do something they want you to do. And historically, that's the way it's often been. Religion has often been used, as Mark said, Neil, as the opiate of the people, to control people. And that's taking God's name in vain. People, have often used religion to control people and to manipulate people and get them to do what they wanted. And if they didn't do what they wanted, they'd throw a guilt trip on them, and threaten them with hellfire and damnation and everything else. That's a terrible crime, because you're using God's name to manipulate and control other people. So that's the big problem in religion. So as I said, the Bible is incredibly revolutionary because it's a critique of that kind of religion. As I was talking to Neil, it's incredibly revolutionary. We talked about it last week because it's egalitarian. It says everyone is equal in front of God. And God didn't make the covenant with Moses. God made the covenant with the people of Israel all together. All the people there at Mount Sinai, all 600,000, the men and the women and the children, I don't know about the animals, but anyway, the men, women, children, they all made the covenant with God at Sinai. So there was this incredibly egalitarian spirit running through the whole of the biblical tradition. And again, this kind of commandment here is a critique of the misuse of religion. Except people forget it. But that's what it's there for. Do you think religious leaders explain the commandment like this? No. No. Well, that's right, because that's the whole thing, you see. Anyway, so that's what it is. That's why it's there. And if you don't misuse God's name, then everything else becomes in right order. You don't misuse other names. You don't swear. You don't misuse language. If you get things right with God, then everything else falls into place. And so for the Jews then, this is very serious, and so they actually will never say the name of God. Because they don't want to take the risk of misusing God's name, taking God's name in vain, so they just don't say God's name. That's serious.
Do they have a name?
Well, yes, in the Bible it's Yahweh, but they will never pronounce that name, those syllables. Instead, they will always say the Lord. So it's like a euphemism. The Lord said this, or the Lord said that. And so
Yahweh. What's the Lord in Hebrew?
Adonai.
Adonai.
Yeah.
So they always use that. But
So-
then someone wrote. So we only have pre-Ten Commandments Yahweh, and then afterwards only.
No. So in the Bible it has the word Yahweh written, but when they are reading it, they would never say the name of God. They would always say the Lord instead. So it's written. God's name is written, but it's never pronounced. And so instead of pronouncing it, they would say the Lord. So when we read in an English Bible, it says the Lord, L-O-R-D, in capital letters. The Hebrew behind that would be Yahweh. Or, Anyway, that's the way it works. Anyway, so other lesson you can learn from this. Always be a learner and speak respectfully of all spiritual life. Don't criticize what you can't understand. So, you have lots of different religions. One shouldn't be critical of them. One shouldn't, you should just try to understand and be respectful of all religions and all faiths. Okay, let's move on. You should observe the Sabbath. Now, what language is Sabbath? Is that English?
No,
Anglo-Saxon? What? Shabbat? Sabbath, Shabbat? What language is it? Hebrew. So why is it not translated? Why is this word not translated into English? It's untranslatable. In fact, it's untranslatable into any other language. There is no other language in the world which has a word which means Sabbath. So what does that say?
Special.
Yes. And so it's the most, so for Jews they say that's what makes us different from everybody else. We have a Sabbath. No other people or has that word. That's what makes them different to everybody else. So the Sabbath then is the most holy day for the Jews. So how often does the Sabbath come round? Once a week. So the most holy day comes round once a week, not once a year, once a week. Isn't that nice? And what is this day? What did Jews do on the Sabbath? It's a day of rest. And so it goes all the way back to creation. God created the world on the 6th day, on the 7th day God rested. So God wants us to be like him, so God takes a rest on the 7th day. Of course, he wants us to take a rest on the 7th day. And so this then is a day for God and for family. And it's a day... Sorry, there's your dad wants to get in, David. And so this is... Excuse me. It's anyway, so it's a day for God and the family. So they work for 6 days, and on the 7th day they don't work. So by not working, that means they don't light any fires. That means there's no cooking is done, no washing up is done, no housework is done, people can't go in cars anywhere. So what this means then is all the food needs to be prepared before the Sabbath begins, and all the washing up is done when the Sabbath ends. So what does that mean? What does it mean practically? What does that mean? Sorry? Yeah, but just imagine, what does it mean? If you're a woman, what does it mean? Sorry? Sorry? Lot of mess, okay. No, it means that the mother or the wife can sit down and enjoy the meals and everything together with the family, because nobody's in the kitchen cooking, preparing the meals. Nobody's doing the washing up afterwards. Everybody is resting. So before the Sabbath begins, the whole family gets together to prepare for it, and when the Sabbath ends, everybody does the washing up. But during the Sabbath itself, they just spend time together. Prayer, worship, singing, studying, playing games, playing musical instruments. Yeah? And everybody has to be there on that day, because nobody goes to work on that day. Yeah? So if you're going to build a God-centered family, then you need to create a structure where God can be present in the family. Yeah? There has to be an outward structure for God to be present. And so that's what God created here through creating the Sabbath. God created this structure for where God could dwell in the family one day of the week, when everybody is there together. Yeah? No television. Yeah, that's why most Jews play musical instruments, because they entertain each other on the Sabbath. They play games together on the Sabbath. And all sorts of things together. Yeah? And so this is saying then there's more to life than work. Yeah? But also there's more to life than fun. It's going to be fun all the time. And so, yeah, it's an important thing here. When you rest when you're weary. Spiritual refreshment can be found in nature, friends, music, worship, and solitude. So it's a day, so sometimes you get some people who are workaholics. They work 7 days a week. Don't spend time out to reflect on the purpose of life. Why am I working? Don't spend the time out with their family. So this is like a sort of guillotine. Yeah. Actually, one day of the week you have to take time to reflect upon the meaning of life, the purpose of life. Take time to be rested, so when you go into the new week, you're refreshed. Yeah? Your soul is refreshed, so you don't become burnt out. People get burnt out when they just keep working. Yeah, so it's just continuously every 7 days taking a day out to be refreshed. And this is actually something of extraordinary significance, as you can see here, what it says in the Bible. Observe the Sabbath because it is holy to you. So it's a holy day. For 6 days, work is to be done. So what does that mean? Work is good. Through work is about the third blessing. Work is creative. Mark's got that part right. The value of work and labour in creation of oneself. Work is good. But not 7 days a week. And this is a radical in the ancient world. In the ancient world, slaves worked all day long, every day. Everybody worked. It wasn't normal to have 1 day off a week. It was a completely radical new thing that was introduced. Yeah.
So, like in all the ancient cultures, it was always every day the same.
Yes, there was no day set aside like this. It was a complete innovation.
What about free people?
Yes, but there wasn't a day. They could work 7 days a week. I mean, the point is they were free. Whereas here is the idea: 6 days a week you're involved in the creative process. You're working. But on the 7th day you don't work. God is God. God is creative. God is involved in things. So in that sense, you're sitting back Yeah? So it's God's day in that sense. So it's making this demarcation between these two things, and nobody else in the ancient world ever did that on the world. I mean, nowadays we think, oh, I've got the weekend off. But this is a new thing. Yeah, and it's only because of the biblical tradition. Anyway, so the Israelites are to observe the Sabbath, celebrating for the generations to come as a lasting covenant. So a covenant is an agreement. So something should be an eternal covenant. It is a sign between me and the Israelites forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth. On the seventh day he abstained from work and he rested. So again, you get this idea here that something should be forever. It's not just for the Jews. This is actually for all humanity. Yeah, something which we should practice. Unfortunately, we didn't, initiate this tradition. Okay, you shall honour your father and mother. Is there anything unusual about this? Honour your father. What's this about then?
Physical parents.
Yeah, okay. Your natural parents. Yeah. To respect them, okay. Is there anything unusual about this commandment?
And mother.
Yes, and mother.
Crazy.
Yes, again, this is extraordinary, radical. It's not just honour your father, it's not supporting a patriarchal society, it's not supporting patriarchal family. It says honour your father and mother. In other words, the father and mother have equal value and equal authority within the family. This is something said 3,500 years ago. When did the women's movement start? Feminism?
50 years ago.
Well, exactly. This is 3,500 years ago this statement was made. Equality of men and women. And again, the ancient traditions are always very patriarchal, male-dominated societies. If you look at Confucianism, the most important relationship within Confucianism is the relationship between father and son. Yeah, actually, women don't get a look in. Yes?
Because especially in Africa, there's a lot of matriarchal societies. Is that pre-this, or does it
No, they just happen to be around. But if you look at the family structure, it's usually because the men, don't get involved. And that's why the women are there, bringing up the family. It's matriarchal because the men aren't involved in the family, generally speaking. They're not successful societies in terms of being prosperous and safe and etc. But anyway, here it said it's the equal value of men and women. It's also saying honour your father and mother. So here's the idea that lineage is important. It's not just your natural parents, because that's where your genes come from, but also through them you can get wisdom, knowledge, understanding, skills passed on through the generations. So there's a vertical lineage, tradition, wisdom passed on. So again, love your family, aim to be thankful for your parents, especially when it seems most difficult. So is it always easy to It doesn't, it says honour your father and mother, be thankful, respect them, and honour them. And, there are different ways in which you can honour your parents. Never do anything that they're going to, let them feel they're going to let them down. And, if we come from our parents, through loving our parents, in that sense, it's loving ourselves. If you can't love your parents, it's actually quite difficult to love yourself, because that's where you come from. So, you shall not murder. So, how's it normally translated in English? You shall not kill. Okay, the Hebrew actually says you shall not murder. So which is better, you shall not murder, you shall not kill? What's the Okay, what's the difference? Okay, what's the difference between kill and murder then, Neil?
It's accidental manslaughter, but it's intentional to murder.
It's more than just intentional. I mean, are soldiers accidentally killing their enemies? No, hopefully not. But
is it to do with the sort of where the desire to do it comes from?
It's if
Self-centered sort of desire.
yes, I mean, if a soldier kills an enemy soldier, he's doing it deliberately and intentionally.
For the nation.
Sorry?
For the nation.
But it's not against the law. He's not breaking the law. It's not murder. Of course, if the soldier puts up a white flag or his hands and then he shoots him, that's murder. There's a difference. Yeah? And so killing, sometimes, very sadly, is allowable in that sense. It's allowable in self-defense. And if you're a soldier fighting to defend your country, then again, that's not against the law. You can kill with a clear conscience in that sense. It's not... Sorry?
Soldier's conscience is hardly clean based on their own accounts. So
Sorry?
even soldier's conscience is hardly clean on
Right.
their own account.
Well, that's what I had... That sense, obviously it's not easy and it's etc., 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 but they don't need to...
Yeah, legally it's...
Right. And, also, you meet soldiers who kill lots of people and they're very brave, they get an award, and often they're extraordinary, good-hearted and generous people and quite humble. So, they're not criminals. But again, a lot of it depends on the motivation as well. Anyway, so what this is saying is life is precious, so we should love life. And if you say, you shall not kill, then it's problematic. A murder is specifically, you're killing a premeditated, illegal action to kill somebody because you have a motivation, such as you hate them or you want to, rob them or something else. It's a very different self-centered motivation. And, so it says self-defense and is justified. Okay, you shall not commit adultery. So what's adultery? Yeah, it means you're having a sexual relationship with somebody you're not married to. Particularly somebody who's already married to somebody else. Either you're married and you're having a sexual relationship with somebody you're not married to, or you're not married but you're having a sexual relationship with somebody who's already married. And so there's also that word fornication, where you're having two people who are unmarried have a sexual relationship with each other. And so what this is saying then is love is precious. Because what most easily destroys the family, most easily destroys the trust and the love between a husband and wife, is when one of them commits adultery. It ruins that relationship between husband and wife, and very easily leads to divorce and the breakup of the family, and the incredible harm that's done to the children as a result of that, and spiritual, emotional damage, psychological damage. So all these commandments, you might think, they're all negative commandments. They're saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But what they're saying here is love is precious. Because love is precious, don't violate the law of love. Because life is precious, don't murder. Yeah? So they're just... And so again, you shall not steal. So again, this is showing respect for ownership. If somebody owns something, a car or a house or a bicycle or something, don't steal it. This belongs to somebody. In that sense, this thing is an extension of this person. So just if somebody steals something from you, you feel personally violated because you feel that thing which was stolen is an extension of myself. I know people whose houses have been burgled. They feel like they've been violated. Somebody came in and took stuff and they feel, I can't live here anymore. It's like, in that sense, a bit like being raped. Yeah? And so what this commandment then is saying, respect ownership. And because things are an extension of yourself. So love people and never steal. And also the importance here of tithing, which we looked at before. So if you can't steal then, this means that the Bible recognizes ownership, or what we call modern world private property. Things that are owned. You shall not bear false witness. What's that about then?
Lying.
Sorry?
Lying.
Yeah, more specific than lying. Where do you find witnesses?
Crime.
Uphold justice.
Yeah, it's in a court. Somebody's accused of committing a crime, and you find witnesses who saw it. Yeah, so if you don't have witnesses, then how can you prove that person committed that crime? That's why witnesses are very important, for there to be justice. Otherwise, some powerful person can accuse somebody of doing something, and that person can get punished just because a powerful person says it. But actually, if you have to have witnesses, This means that it limits the power of the powerful people to getting the people they don't like put in prison, because there have to be independent witnesses who see this crime committed. Witnesses are very important. So what's the problem with a false witness? Well, a false witness is when